Greetings all, this is Satchmo3 of the 405th. I've put together this unfolding tutorial to illustrate some of the practices I use when performing unfolds for 3D models. I'm hoping this tutorial will help interested community members in improving their overall unfold skills. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to post in the thread below. Before we begin, I should mention I'm assuming you, the viewer, already have some familiarity with the Pepakura Designer program. If not, I recommend you visit or search out the Tamisoft Pepakura Designer website where you'll be able to download the program as well as find instructional and help files to run it. On screen is an overview of the topics I'll be discussing. We'll start by taking a look at an unfold I've previously completed. We'll be considering the Halo 4 War Master helmet. So we'll look at a completed model to identify some of the goals I strive for when performing an unfold and the practices I use to meet those goals. Then we'll move to creating a new unfold of the same model. We'll start by defining open edges in the 3D view before we unfold the model. Then we'll unfold the model and set up the part organization in the 2D view. From there, we'll finish up by refining the part organization in the 2D view and completing the unfold. To begin, we're in Pepakura Designer 3, looking at an unfold I've previously prepared for the Halo 4 War Master helmet. On the left side of the screen we have the 3D model view, and on the right side of the screen we have the 2D parts layout. Now when preparing an unfold, we primarily want to consider the end user for the file. And the end user is the person preparing or assembling the paper. We want to make it as least time consuming and as easy to put together to minimize any kind of mistakes. To that end, what I try to do is maximize the size of our parts. So what that ends up doing is decreasing the amount of cutting and gluing the assembler has to do, decreases the amount of parts the assembler has to keep track of, and it decreases the amount of edges that the assembler has to align, and that decreases, chances of misalignments that could lead to skew and distortions with the overall paper when it's glued up and put together. So, trying to maximize part size, what I find that I usually end up with is long strips of paper, or parts made up of multiple long strips of paper. If I open up the size of the openings in the 3D model view, we see these long strips of paper or multiple strips of paper within the part that follow the natural contours and curves of the helmet or whatever file you're working with. We specify it to follow these curves because that minimizes the amount of fold lines that are contained within the part. All the harsher angles will be towards the outer edge of the strip, where the assembler will have to be folding anyway due to the connection tabs. Now, when specifying the edges or the ends of my long strips, I'm trying to think of how bricks are laid. When a brick wall is laid, the ends of the bricks are offset from the next row of bricks. In that same manner, the edges of my long strips are offset from the edges of the adjacent piece, and what this will do when the person assembling the paper is assembling the paper, it creates a better structural stability for the paper model. So those are kind of the primary goal, which is to make the paper as easy and quick to put together as possible, and we do that by creating these long parts or parts made up of these long strips. Now that I've identified some of the practices I use when preparing unfolds, we'll actually run through and perform a new unfold for that same Halo 4 War Master helmet. So I've booted up Pepakura Designer 3, this time with an OBJ file that has been exported from the Blender 3D modeling software, and we'll get something like this. When I create the models, I put some color to it. Typically, models won't have color when they're for Pepakura, so it'll look something more along these lines, but I'll leave the color in just to better describe what I'm doing. So our first objective will be to specify open edges, and we'll do this pretty much solely in the 3D model view of Pepakura Designer. In order to specify the open edges, we'll use the knife tool, which can be found in the tray at the top of the program. And here, if we run our mouse along the edges of the model, it creates a green highlight to show where we are, and if we left click it, it'll turn orange to indicate that that edge has been specified as an open edge. So what we're going to do is run through, and to the best of our ability, it takes some educated guesswork on where we want to create our open edges to create our long strips of paper. To help with that, we'll go to Settings, Other Settings, and we've got this function down here to hide almost flat folding lines. We're going to decrease this to between 160 and 165 degrees. What'll happen when we decrease this is these edges that go perpendicular to our strip will disappear because they're greater than the angle between this face and this face is greater than the angle that we're specifying to hide. So we'll click OK, and when we do that, we see that a lot of these lines following the curve have been hidden, but we still see the black lines that are what we're going to make our open edges. So in this way, we can see how we want to set up our strips. Now, to help with speeding this along in the unfold process is if we go to 3D menu, mirror point, if we have a model that is symmetrical down the YZ plane, we can use this tool to specify open edges on one side of the YZ plane, and it will follow through and do the same thing on the other side. So this the ability to use this depends on how the modeler has set up the model, but it's an effective tool to speed things along. So as I said, all we're going to do to first specify our open edges is follow the contour lines of the model. Now we notice, although these edges are hidden, they're still there, so we want to make sure we've got them clicked. Now when I have this long strip, it terminates into a strip that goes the other direction, so we want to utilize those black lines to follow the natural curve of the model. In this way, again, we're making our long stripped pieces. Now in some cases, we want to leave those black lines alone so that our long strips are bending around into other strips. So there's no real right or wrong way to do this, but there's some educated guesswork. And the more you play with these models, in performing these unfolds, the more intuitive you'll find it is to specify these open edges. So we're going to follow the opening of the neck seal all the way around. So we've created a pretty long strip here in this gray strip. We'll do the same thing coming around on the bottom. We'll make this brown strip all the way from front to back. Moving up, we'll essentially be doing the same thing. Every once in a while you get a straight line. You can just left click it again to turn it off. So here we have to make a choice. What I'm going to do is, we have this strip following around back here. I'm going to allow this to turn around and follow right on back up to the front. We'll see how that winds up being when we perform our unfold and start looking at the 2D view. You want to make sure these thinner strips are long so that they're all one part. So we've got the opening here for the visor, and what we're going to do is follow that whole thing around from bottom to top. And then we're going to allow that to terminate and start bleeding into this brim in brown here. And that brim is going to follow along back around here. And then here again, we're going to let that bleed into this strip that we're defining that follows this curved surface. Here we're coming up around this way, and then that part's going to again follow this curved ear cup kind of thing. Let's see what that does to us. So now we'll make that cut there. So we've got a piece that's kind of going all over the place. But that's okay. We will, when we do our 2D parts layout, we'll look at what we've got to work with. Here again on this nose recess, we've got this thinly stripped part that we want to make sure is all one long strip. Now we'll have to have a control opening to define the end of our strip. So we can either do this now, or we can do it later when we're considering our 2D portion. So again, I'm noticing that there's strips that surround the perimeter of these eye recesses. So I'm just going to go ahead and follow those along. I'm going to follow this up into this little recess at the forehead of the visor. And then I'll just put these across here like so. Finish following the recess for the eyes. Then I'll just create some strips here. We've got this little black brim piece that I think I'll follow along like so. And let's see, we'll finish these little recesses near the cheeks. Again, we're following this thin strip around and back into the recess. We'll finish it like that and see what we have in the 2D view. We got these recesses here, which we'll cut like that. And finishing up our forehead, follow the perimeter of the recess, create some control lines, and we'll see what that looks like in the 2D view when we go to unfold. Finish up those lines. Although the black line disappeared here, we can still see that that's going to be a not flat surface. So we're going to run through and define this open edge in the center of the model. We'll follow along on this raised surface to create the strip. So here we see this long strip following around this raised surface here, and turning back and going back on the symmetrical side. And we'll run through the dial at the back of the helmet. This will be a slightly trickier piece on our parts layout because it's somewhat more defined, or defined with greater detail than some of the rest of the helmet. So there we have our 3D model with edges specified. What I'm going to do now is just go ahead and save this guy. We'll just put today's date on it. Now we'll move to unfold the model onto the 2D view. Before I do that, I'll go to File, Print and Paper Settings, set my paper size to letter, 8.5 by 11 inches. I'll decrease my margins on the sides and tops and bottoms to 5 millimeters. I've got print lines clearly checked, print page number and whatever else. I'll click OK. And now we move to click the unfold button. I want to make sure my auto is unchecked so that when I click the unfold button, my parts layout prompt comes up and I can specify my part size. I'll make this helmet height of 340 millimeters. It automatically adjusts the width and depth proportionally. And all I'll do is click OK. It'll run through and perform the unfold. And so here we see a rough layout of our parts, and we see all those strips that we've created over here in the 3D view. Now that we've performed our unfold function, we're going to move from the 3D view to the 2D parts layout view to organize our parts. Before we start breaking the parts down and maximizing the part size, we're going to shift the parts to more clearly see the symmetry with them. We want to try to maintain the symmetry as much as possible. We've got a symmetrical 3D model, and we want the parts to be symmetrical so that when you're building half of this half of the paper, you're doing the same things on this half of the paper. And what this will allow the paper assembler to do is minimize the chances of anything differentiating this side from this side. Again, it's easier to get put together, and it minimizes any chances for distortions or skew with the model. So before we start manipulating our 2D view model, I want to share some shortcuts to speed things along. If I if I right click on the view over here, we can see there's some control and key button shortcuts that we can do to move between the different functions we're going to be using. You know, you got the select and move the parts, rotate the parts, join, disjoin the faces, so that'll join up the edges or cut the edges. And then we've got the edit flaps, where we can flip-flop where the flaps are from one edge to the other edge of our defined open edges. So those shortcuts are all great and fine, but they require you to look down at your keyboard and click 2 buttons per function. To speed that along, we're going to go to Settings, Other Settings, the Keyboard Shortcuts tab. In here, it allows you to actually specify your own shortcuts for those functions. What I like to do is use the ASDF keys on my keyboard, and I tie those to select and move, rotate part, join, disjoin face, and edit flap. And in this manner, I'm right-handed, so I use my right hand on the mouse. So I move my right hand around on the mouse. I take my left hand and I place my pinky, ring, middle, and forefinger on ASDF without any modifiers, so I can quickly, with one button keystrokes, switch between the different functions. If I click OK and type A with my pinky finger, I can click and select and move around pieces. If I press and hold the control button, I can select multiple pieces, and then I can release control and move those around. In the same manner, I can create bounding boxes by just left-clicking and creating a box to create to select multiple pieces. Then if I hit the S button with my ring finger, it brings up the rotate parts function, where I can select a vertice and rotate about that axis. If I keystroke the D, it creates the join disjoin function, and I can join up pieces and disjoin them. I'm going to hit Control Z to undo that. And then with my forefinger, I keystroke F, and it brings up the prompt to flip-flop my flaps. And I can run through and do that, and so in that way I can switch through the different functions fairly quickly without having to look down, so it speeds along the time to perform the unfold. Okay, so now on to our objective number 2, which is to roughly lay out our pieces in order to be able to see the symmetry. Already you can see, so right now our pieces are larger, our parts are larger than the layout of our pages. We don't care so much about that right now. We're going to leave them as large as they are. I'm going to press A here to do my select and move. So I'm just going to go ahead and line up all these pieces. In order to be able to see the symmetry with the 2D parts layout. So this is going to help us as we're doing something to one half of the model. We will do it to the other half at the same time, and it will be fairly straightforward, as opposed to if the parts were strewn about all over the 2D layout view. It'd be more difficult to keep things as consistent. If you have I recommend using a mouse with the middle mouse key to be able to easily click and drag around both the 2D and 3D layouts, as well as a scroll wheel to be able to zoom in and out, again on both the 2D and 3D viewports. Now we actually have a fair amount of small pieces. Again, the end goal will be to join these up to create larger pieces or parts. For now, we'll get the medium-sized ones kind of laid out like that. We'll actually try to connect some of these up right now. So I'm going to click my D key, which is the join, just join. We're just going to try a few things out and see if we can. So when I do that, if I click this piece, it brings in its adjoining piece. So I know that goes there. I'm just going to click this one to get that one on that piece, on that part there. Do the same thing here. We see that goes there. Can't fit that there because it's overlapping. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to undo this because I'm seeing that these pieces join up with these pieces. So I should say these parts. So for the time being, I'm just going to make those a little bigger than they were. This one might have to remain where it is. Maybe grab those smaller pieces there. Maybe grab those smaller pieces. Here again, we're joining these smaller pieces up into larger pieces. Here I'm noticing these are part of the dial, so I'm going to throw those by the rest of what I know to be the dial. I'm going to cut this so that these parts can be symmetrical. Again, I know these curved surfaces, and when I select them here, they highlight on the 3D view, so you can use that to your advantage to know what pieces you're looking at. I'm going to leave all those little pieces alone. Here's the inner piece of the nose. Double click there. It's connecting up to the raised strip of the nose. I should say I'm double clicking when I'm doing my join, just join. I'm double clicking to bring that in. So in this manner, we've more or less move things around. So that we can clearly see, we drew an imaginary line down the middle here, and here we can see the symmetry from side to side. Symmetry from side to side, side to side. Click once, control, click again, symmetry from side to side, and so forth. Now before we complete this objective, what I'm going to do, again, all in the service of symmetry, we have these tabs that when we did our unfold, they alternate from edge to edge. I don't really want that. I want the edges also to be, or excuse me, I want the tabs to also be symmetrical, again, so that when you're building from one side to the other side, you're performing the same kinds of gluing and folding. So I will go through. I've keystroked F to bring up the flap edit tool. Same thing if you did Control F or right clicked and select edit flaps. Again, the F key shortcut helps to speed things along. So I'll just move it, so I'll just edit all the flaps so that they're consistent from side to side. And when I'm doing this, I'm trying to move all the flaps. If there's a thinner strip, I'll move the flaps to the thinner strip, because if I bring the just join tool in and then I unclick it here, I want the flap to be on the thinner side so that there's more space when I'm going to glue this later. There's more area, surface area here to attach that tab. If I move the tab to the other side, and if this one was, oh, hold on. If this one wasn't there, you'll get, sometimes you'll have very thin pieces that tab will actually run over, and that creates a problem when you're trying to then connect this piece here, because you've got all these tabs in the way. Hitting Control Z for undo a bunch. So again, I'm primarily moving my tabs so that they're symmetrical and so that they're on the side of the edge with the thinner strip part. As I'm doing this, you're noticing this red line defining where the flap is coming from. You can always zoom out and check to see, but for the most part, you're just trying to make things symmetrical. And if we need to move them later, if they all need to move to the side of the opening, edge opening, if they need to move to the side that has the thinner piece, we can always do that later. We can make some minor adjustments in order to make the piece symmetrical. Sometimes the unfold will not be quite symmetrical, even though we've defined our surfaces. Here, since our tabs are so close together, we're actually going to move those to whatever their adjoining edge will be. We'll do the same thing here. So I'll see if I can, so these, as I'm noticing this, these are going from one side to the other. So what this is telling me, if I select these, That's that shared seam between the center. So we'll just leave those on one edge. Of that seam. When I get to stripped parts that end in these sharp points, I want to try to make, later on we're going to try to attach these to other strips, but I want the tab to be on the part with that pointed end. Same theory as moving. See, now I'm seeing this red line connecting to this thinner part, so I'm actually going to move these back. Same theory here on this corner piece as a piece with a thin strip. We want to have that tab on the piece that's thinner, or it ends in a point, because the other half is probably going to have more surface area in order to make our glue attachment when assembling the paper. What I'm going to do is try to speed up the video to show what I'm doing, and I don't think I need to explain too much while I'm running through and doing this. Okay, so now we have our preliminary parts layout set up to show us the symmetry. Now we'll move to our last objective, which is to refine our 2D part layout, to break these larger pieces down to fit on a page, or to connect the strip parts up to make a piece as large as possible, again still maintaining within our page boundaries. So we'll start with some of the easy pieces, easy parts, like this strip right here. What we're going to want to do is use our rotate function. A lot of times on these long strips we'll be kind of considering it on the diagonal on our page layout to see just exactly what we can fit on the page. We're also going to be doing things like connecting up any small edges that we can in order to be able to minimize the amount of small tabs that the assembler would have to glue together when putting the paper together. So here we tried something out. We see that we've got some overlap on a different piece when we do that, so that connection isn't viable. So let's try something like joining that guy up, and we'll do the same thing on the other side. So as we're going through and doing this, we want to maintain our symmetry and consistency from side to side. So obviously these sections are too large, or these parts are too large to fit on a page. I'm going to take this guy, rotate him here, cut there so that that fits on the page. And do the same thing on the other side. Now this too overlaps the page. Going back to what I said previously, we want to offset the open edge on the end of our strip from the open edge on the adjacent strip. So if I see here, if I disjoin that guy, we'd have this open edge and open edge. We really want that open edge on this piece to be here or further down on our strip. So we'll connect that back up. We're actually going to make it here. So now if we disjoined here and connected this guy up, we'd have this offset opening, just like, again, if you think about how bricks are laid on a brick wall. So I'll Control Z and undo some moves there. Do the same thing on that side. And so if we go ahead and select that piece, that part, we see what we have is those strips that are coming down here, turning and folding back up. Again, going from front to back, folding around and going back to the front. So we've got our multi-strip, fairly large piece that fits onto our page. Then we have to go back and clean up the smaller pieces that we've now created, and we do the same kinds of things. We're going to test out our selection. We have a bit of overlap there. What that is this, where it's turning this corner here. These are pretty close, but I'm going to undo that because I don't want that slight overlap to be there. I'll try to connect that up there. That works pretty good. And when I do that, we're negating the need for this very sharp piece. So we don't have to worry about messing around or gluing that tab if you're the person assembling this paper. So that's a good move to try to do. And connect that one up. And we see here that's a fairly strong piece now. We don't have to worry about making that fold at all. And if I'm the person assembling the paper, we'll glue this seam right down the middle and complete this part. So we'll leave that there for now. We'll actually test out. We've got some overlap. That doesn't work, so I'll undo that. It's kind of a trial and error process to see how you want things to fit. That doesn't work, so I'm going to undo it. It doesn't work, so I'm going to undo it. You could do something like this, similar to what we did down here, but that would require us taking this, kind of centering it on our page. We'd have to probably cut there and there. Again, we've got that off join there. Actually, I think I'm going to leave that just like that. So now instead of 3 pieces or 3 parts, we've minimized the number of parts here. We went from 3 to 2. And we've got our offsets on our parts, on our strips. So those are 2 pretty strong parts. It'll be easy to glue these parts together. Glue this part together, glue this part together, and then glue them both together to make this center ridge on the forehead of the helmet. Here again, we've got these sharp edges. We're going to see if we can connect a piece, connect a part to those sharp edges, and we can. That's this larger part, so we're going to actually cut that there, connect that up. Again, we're trying to maintain our symmetry as we perform this organization of the parts. So I broke that, and I really kind of want to maintain that connection again because it's a small connection. It's always easier to glue up larger tabs than it is smaller, and this part here is never going to fit on a page anyway, so I'm going to do something like use this fold line here to cut that, and rejoin this up because I want to maintain that edge. If I connect that there and there, we see that this this face and this face are larger than this strip. I'm going to undo all that. I'm actually going to move the tabs right there. Again, it's going to be easier to work with the tabs on the thinner strip than thicker strips. Rotating this, we see it doesn't fit on this page. So we're going to try some things out and see how best this goes together. I cut this, move it there to maintain our symmetry. Click those to bring it in. Here we see when I do this, we're going to end up, this part that I cut into halves is really this curved piece here. When I do that, I don't want to have, actually, how is this going together? Alright, so this is actually like that. That's that curved piece. I connect these pieces. We see how that all goes together. Just going to play, see what makes the most sense for putting this thing together. What I'll probably end up doing is something maybe like that. Cut here and here. So I'm going to maintain this piece here, and then I'll just leave this little guy there to fill that in when assembling the paper. Then I can move these rabbit ears to the adjacent page. I want to see if it makes sense to connect up another part. I'll do the same thing, the opposite side, make a cut, rotate this so I maintain my symmetry. So I'm just running through, and again, just kind of bringing things in and undoing things to take things out. Now here's that piece, here's that part before that we left alone. It's too big, so I'm now seeing that some of it fits onto this part. So I'm going to bring that in there. I'm going to make a cut there. I'll run to the symmetrical side, throw it in there, make the same cut. I'm going to bring this in just to see what the adjacent piece looks like. We don't want to make a cut here, and we've got a solid piece there, so I'm going to undo that, and now that part is smaller and we can fit it somewhere on a page. So we'll just rotate that. We'll leave it there for now. This part is obviously too large to fit on a page. I'm going to have to cut this small strip somewhere. I'm going to make the cut right there and there. Move those to be symmetrical. And I'll see if I can connect anything to this part to make it larger. When I do that, I still need to be able to fit on the page, so I'll undo that work. And I'll just leave that alone for now. We could leave it like that. Or we can figure what else to do with it. Again, here's another part. So, what this is, is the opening of the neck seal, and then it's all these raised surfaces. This is a pretty complicated piece, but when we put it together, what we're going to do is make this up. If you're actually assembling the paper, you'd put that together, then you'd connect it up to that, and you'd put that together and connect it up with this piece, put that together, connect it up with this piece, put that together, connect it up with this piece, and so on. So it would work out pretty well. What I'm going to do is I want to make my cut on that strip on as beefy or wide as a part of the strip as I can. So I'm going to make the cut there. I'm going to see if I can maintain this whole thing by rotating it. It's probably going to be a bit too big, which it is. It's not too bad, but it's a little too big. So what I'm going to have to do is cut it somewhere else, and let's see here. I think what I'll do is make a cut there and there. So I'll reconnect that with that. And I've actually going to connect that up. So now we see we've actually cut that from that larger piece. This guy is still a bit too large to fit on the page, so I'm going to make a cut there and there. And connect this elsewhere later. Now I've got a piece that fits on the page. I actually like to leave these right on those, but I don't think that's going to be possible unless I were to do something like that. So I'm going to take those off, and that's what I'll do. I'll maintain this track around the dial, and this will be those raised pieces around the back of the helmet detail there. So now I've got to break this apart somehow. If I bring that in, I see I've got a solid edge there, I've got a solid edge there. I could actually leave that right on that. So I kind of want to maintain this piece. So I'm going to go back, and I think I made that cut earlier. And I'm going to remake the cut. This ribbon is still going to be too large to fit on a page, or maybe not. Oh, it looks like it fits fine. So we'll move this one we'll keep those connected. Again, we're gonna see if it makes sense to connect up another strip to this strip, and it kind of doesn't look that way. Still got to deal with this guy. So we've dealt with everything down here. Let's take a look at this big dog here. If I rotate this like so, we can see this strip is going to fit on the page, and we're going to have to make a cut on this thicker piece in order to be able to section this off. I'm going to try this out. So we'll do the same thing on the other side of the larger part. Still got this part that's too large. We're going to cut it right down the middle, bring in this part, and here we see we're going to have an open edge here, adjacent to an open edge there. So I'm going to undo this, undo that, and really what that, bring it in this way now, that's really that. And so this is such a large piece, what I'm actually going to end up deciding to do is I'm going to cut this there and there, connect that up so that we've got this open edge between these parts and a solid edge between that one. I'm going to undo that just to move those back. I'm going to leave it like this. I think it's going to be a stronger connection. And then I can actually go back and consider these and see if it makes sense to connect it up somewhere else. Just kind of running through my options, and I kind of like that one. It's probably not going to work because the piece is, now it's too large that way. But I like that, and I've got some pieces here, I've got some strips here that are pretty thick. So I'm going to move this so I can keep that piece that I just added, and I'm going to break that guy. And see if I can move that part that I just broke off somewhere else. So I bring that in, I bring that in. That looks pretty good. I've connected two smaller pieces to make a larger one. Here we see we've got a sharp edge. We'll see if it makes sense to bring in a different piece or different part to negate that sharp edge, and this does the trick. But it means, forces us to break this somewhere. So I'm going to break those apart again. See if there's somewhere else I can stick those guys. So I throw them on this larger piece that we still have to deal with. Solid piece, undo, undo. We're going to break it there. We're going to have those solid pieces surrounding these open pieces. That we could do, yeah, that's going to fit. There's not much we can do to join another piece apart to this strip. On either side, it looks like we could maybe do something like with that big dog. I'm going to undo. That part's going to be too big, but I'll take this. make a cut there, make a cut there, connect these up, connect that up. We got two long strips, and we've made this piece that we had over here, I think. We made that larger. We'll rotate that 180 degrees. We got a solid and a solid, so we can break that in half. We've got a sharp angle. We'll see if we can minimize that. We can do it one of two ways, it looks like. That piece is going to be too long. We'll see if we can fit this on a page. Not quite, but I do like that we got rid of this sharp edge, so I'm going to keep that. Undo. I'm going to do this to the other side. Rotate it. So obviously we have some overhang on the page, so I'm going to have to do something about that. Not sure just what yet. Let's undo this. Let's move this like so. I'd like to cut this here and cut that there. What we end up again with an open edge and an open edge, which I would like to avoid. But I might not be able to in this case. What I could do, gotta find a new home for this guy and that guy. So here we've got an edge and an edge, and I think I'm going to leave it. Again, I just try as much as you can to offset the ends, but they don't always need to be offset. If you like the design, you like the design. So now zooming out, our last big piece is this guy. We'll move him over here just so we can see the bounds of our paper. I'm going to start with this long strip here, rotate it a bit to see what we have to work with as far as the page size goes. We'll probably make a cut there and there, and we're dealing with, and we'll take a look at the small piece. So we could do something like that, but that's never going to work for a page size. This brings it closer into the body of the overall piece. It'd be nice if we could leave this guy together, which it looks like we can. I'm going to make a break there, and we'll actually make a break there, I think. Do the same thing other side of the piece. See if it makes sense to connect this up to anything else. Kind of doesn't. The piece looks pretty solid. We want to maintain this thin edge, so what we're going to probably end up doing something like this. Instead of breaking it here, for instance, we're going to again break it on the section of the part that is thicker. Now we'll we'll see if we can, if it makes sense to connect anything up here. That's a pretty good. So now we're moving the smaller piece onto this part to make it larger. That seems to make a lot of sense. Let's see if we can do that anymore. Kind of doesn't look like it. Actually kind of like that. What I might do is maybe I'll break that there. I think I'll undo this. I think I like it better like that. This would be a nice piece, except it overlaps there. Let's see if I can do anything about that. What I could do is break that apart there. Do the same thing on the other side. Rejoin this up over here. Don't mind that at all. So now all of our big parts are broken down. We'll go through and see if we can connect up any of these smaller parts to a larger part. These guys fit in here. So I can connect him up there and he doesn't overlap anything. Do the same thing on that side. There's some major overlap there, so major overlap there, overlap there, no overlap there. But what we have is a piece that's not symmetrical. We could leave it like that, but I like to maintain the symmetry. We've got some small connections to make here. Instead of that, I'm going to break this here, make that smaller connection, so that when you're assembling the paper, you're making the larger connection. I like that. Connect that up. That doesn't work. That doesn't work. This is this little piece kind of in the middle here, so that's probably going to be on its own. Here we have these little cheek pieces. There's probably not a lot we're going to be able to do with that, well, except for this. So that's going to be connected up to this space here. We'll do the same thing on the other side. I have to re-rotate that around. This little piece here, I believe, section here is the surface of the, it's either the inner surface or this guy going around here. Let's break that apart and put that there. I don't know if I'll be able to make that work. So that's the larger piece and the smaller piece, so we want to connect the smaller tabs up. When I do that, I might overextend myself and not be able to fit this on the page any longer. It doesn't look like I can. What I can do is break this apart. Down here, readjust this so it fits on the page, mirror it. So that fits on the page. I think I'll leave this like this. The only thing I don't like is this little sharp corner here, which I think is this. So if I were to connect that up elsewhere, I'd have to break that apart. And although this is a bigger tab, I could leave it like this, and this is a bigger tab than if I undo it. This would be, I kind of like this smaller tab because it decreases the amount of sharp edges we have there. So I'll leave that there. There's not a ton we can do with these pieces. They are the recesses on the inner portion of this chin area. Can't really connect that up because it's recessed. What I could do is break this apart and move it here and move that there. You'd be dealing with this sharp edge though, so I'm going to undo that and I'll leave that just like that. That's the recess up there. Not a ton we can do with this, but I want to minimize the amount of these sharp edges, so I'll cut that down and cut that down. Move that there. I think that's a bit stronger piece. See if I can connect these strips up anywhere. Looks like it might be a pain to do so. So these might just have to kind of stay all on their lonesome. This is the nose recess. That'll have to maintain its own piece. This here, we're going to connect that there and connect that there. Now this is that whole forehead piece. We've got some overlap here though. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut that out and cut that out. Connect these together. Now that's just that little bridge there. I don't like the sharp edge we've created, so we'll try to marry it up to that. That looks a bit ugly, so I'm going to cut this, let's see, get that out of the way, remarry that up. I'd like to try to keep this bridge together. In order to do that, I'm going to have to do something like this. So now we've got that piece going up there. It's probably a horse apiece how we decide to do this. I'm going to move our tab. Since we can't exactly connect that up, I'm just going to move the tabs to that sharp cornered piece. I'll move these so that the larger tab is the one we're going to make in the reel if we assemble the paper. And that's our little forehead piece that'll probably have to stay how it is. Can't very easily connect it up without creating some issues, so we'll just leave that there. Now what we have is a bunch of parts that are fitting onto our pages. A few more that we haven't addressed yet. We'll run through and clean this up. This is that. We're probably going to leave that alone. That's probably fine. Rotate this. We've got this dial to deal with. Again, I'm going to move my tabs so that they're on that sharp section. Now we'll deal with this dial. When I have these kind of circular pieces or parts, I usually move all my tabs to the outer edges of the circle. Here we got some thin pieces, thin parts that we're going to want our tabs to be on. Actually going to cut that. And move it there so it's symmetrical. So that's going to be those pieces and that piece. What we're going to end up doing is putting those there. So now it's that whole little recessed part. And we've got this guy. Again, we're going to put our tabs on the outer edge of our curved surface. And we're going to, instead of breaking this over here, we're going to break it right there. On the 3D, you still got your, although it's shaded out here, you can still specify your open edge over here. So we did that just because it's the middle. We can see that better over here than we can with this circular piece over here, circular part over here. Then we're going to connect that back up. And we'll probably leave this connector, well, we'll just leave it like that. So now that whole part is the outer faces of the dial. We've got two parts for the inner faces of the dial, so we can put that piece together and then add it on when we're building this later with paper. I'm going to hit save, and then all that's mainly left to do now is to reorganize the parts to fit on the page. Now we're running through and organizing or moving our parts so that we can minimize the amount of pages we're using overall. It's essentially just a game of Tetris. If you'd like to organize things, you will probably enjoy trying to make things fit as best as possible on the page. I try to move the larger pieces first, and then we'll come back later and infill any white spaces we have with the smaller pieces or smaller parts. So that looks pretty good for our largerish type parts. I'm not too concerned with how the parts go together on the model. I don't need to have all the visor parts on a page or anything like that. I'm not too concerned with doing that. I do want to maintain my symmetry. For the most part. You'll notice I've kind of used my 2D board and kind of spread things around while I've been working with them. So as I'm running through and organizing the pieces for their final layout, I need to migrate things back up to the top a little bit. These tabs can overlap the border. You don't need to cut those out. Precisely when you're cutting out the cardstock paper you're using to build the model. Now I will infill open spaces with our smaller parts that are remaining. And I'll move this up just so I have the blank page at the end of the 2D layout. I'll save this. As a final move, I will edit my tab layout. When we first did the unfold, we had the tabs every other edge, and I didn't like that, but you don't want an edge to be completely void of tabs. You want to have, I try to shoot for 3 tabs, open, 3 tabs closed, 3 tabs open, just so when you're putting the paper together, you're actually kind of interlocking the tabs. And I kind of wait till the end to refine that, because now I've got my final parts layout. I can zoom out and see what makes sense for where the parts go. Again, I want to keep in mind that I want the tabs on the thinner strips than the thicker strips. So as I'm comparing, I've got my flap tool selected. As I'm looking at this red line that shows me where it's connecting, I'm wanting these tabs to be on the thinner piece or part rather than the thicker part. So here's a pretty thin part. I would like some of these tabs on its adjacent part, so I'm going to go to the thickest part, thickest section of this part, and move those over to the other side. Here I'm seeing this side is quite a bit thicker than this side, so I'll move some of those tabs back that way. That's pretty much a horse apiece, so I'll leave that where it is. So I usually try to alternate 2 or 3 tabs. That's that thinner part there, so I'm probably going to end up leaving it just like that. That's probably fine. Might move 1 or 2 there. That's fine. That's that thinner part again, so I'll leave that like that. Thinner part again over here, so I'll leave that like that. I'll move this guy, that guy. So this is actually, since it doesn't have an adjacent part, you can tell that's the neck seal over there. I'll move a couple of those. A couple of those. That's fine. That one's okay. That one I think is fine. These, I'm going to leave all these on this outer edge, and I'll leave all those on that outer edge. Move a couple over there. Actually, I move that back because it's kind of getting thin where that comes in. I'm going to backtrack on what I said. I'm actually going to move some of those tabs over here. Here we've got some thinner strips that I'll move the tabs from these thicker strips back towards. These are probably okay. Those are fine. These look fine for the most part. That section's a bit thick, and I don't have any tabs on this side, so I'll go ahead and move those over there. Actually, put those back. Again, there's no adjacent edge, so that's part of the neck seal. And concerning these pieces, we see it connects up here. Both of these strips are larger or thicker than these strips. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is for the most part, I'll move the tabs over to this, but again, I want to alternate a little bit too, so I will leave some tabs on this and some tabs on that. And really, there you have it. You've got your pieces pretty symmetrical. The tabs are symmetrical, so you build both halves of the helmet, or whatever symmetrical model you're building, if it is symmetrical. Other things you could do And what I like to do is when I do an unfold, I input some text to identify what the model is, who the model's by, and who the unfold is by. When you go to print it, I usually leave the color on. Again, you can turn that off so you can print it if you don't want to have the ink used to print the paper out. If you go to 2D menu, show edge ID, when you zoom in, you can see now that the edge ID is there. When you do put the edge ID, when you turn the edge IDs on and zoom in, it slows down things quite a bit. So usually when I'm working in the 2D area, I'll turn that off, and I try to turn it on before I save it and share it, so that people who are using the file and don't know about that don't have to worry about it. The tabs are already there. So I'll go ahead and save, and that pretty much wraps up the tutorial. Again, if you have any questions or comments, please post in the thread below. If not, thank you 405th for taking a beat and checking the tutorial out. Keep it tight, Spartans.